Today I'm looking at using the sequences feature in the HeartLab software to actually measure a full study. Also be answering some initial questions of why would you consider measuring off the machine, how the sequence is set up, and how to actually use this feature. So as to why you would measure off the machine, it changes the focus for when actually performing the study to be one of image collection rather than trying to get image collection and measurement all done in the one process. It also decreases scanning time, so reduces the time the patient actually needs to be there. It frees up the machine for more scanning because it allows users to actually focus on their measurement offline using standard computers. And in this way, you're actually better optimizing the more expensive equipment for what it's actually made for. Continuing on, it also allows other techs to measure studies, so quieter techs can assist busier technicians at times when there is an uneven distribution of the workload. It also allows appropriate time for people to focus on taking the actual measurements. And it also allows you just to have a look and see previously where measurements were taken on previous studies before actually starting. By using the sequences, it's actually much faster than trying to actually look for each measurement individually as well. It also allows some consistency in the lab because it defines which measurements should be taken. In terms of how they're set up, in settings, there is, for those that actually have access, there is a sequences component within measurements, and which from here you can add and create new sequences and add and edit the previous ones. So how they're set up, so I actually just go and create a new sequence, and then it will open, and then from that point you'll actually just add individual measurements in the order that you want using the plus icon. And then from there you'll end up with this relative list of these measurements. As to how to use this feature, you select the measurement icon at the bottom of the page. Then from there you select measurement sequences, and then you select the sequence that you want to use. In terms of using it, it will come up with a still image, but you can press play just to have a look and pick your points. You can also just use your scroll wheel when you hover over the timeline at the bottom of the page to get to the correct frame to measure. Next, you place your cursor down to do the first measurement, and then hit next step when complete, and it will automatically go to the next measurement. And you continue on this way through the sequence. When you're ready to go to the next measurement, you actually can click the thumbnail associated with that picture, and it'll open up that thumbnail, and then from there you can take that next measurement. You can use the back arrow to repeat a measurement, and you can use skip if the measurement's not needed or it's not measurable in that picture. You can also check where you're up to on the sequence by looking at the bottom of the page. It will tell you which parameter you are measuring. And you can also hover over the sequence name, and it will show you the complete list, and then you can see where you're up to and what comes next. At the very last point, it will give you a save icon, and this is only needed to lock in the final measurement. All the previous measurements are automatically saved on by clicking next. On completion of the sequence, in this case, you actually need to just calculate the ejection fraction. At this stage, it's done by picking both the LV end diastolic frames and the end diastolic volumes and the end systolic volumes, and then from there you can calculate the left ventricular ejection fraction by plane. So next I'll run through a practical example to demonstrate this process. To go through the process, so here I've selected the first image I want to use to measure, and I can just pause that one there, get it to my right frame, and then I'm going to go to this here, the measurement icon, then I'm going to go measurement sequence, and I'm going to go full basic study. And from here I can then scroll through when I get to the point I'm quite happy, and then I'll measure the septum. I'll say okay, the septum's approximately there, and then I'll go next step, and then from there I will measure my left ventricular internal dimension, and I can move that around and do as I need. I'll say yep, that's appropriate, and then I'll go to the next measurement here, and at this point I would then go next step as well. To go to my end systolic frame, I just use the scroll wheel and move the picture to the appropriate frame, and then I can again reposition and put down my cursor. Then next step, and I'll measure the left atrial dimension from there. And then I can go here, it says left atrium, when I go next step, it will tell me the measurement's been saved, and then I can see it's actually aortic root diameter. Similarly as well, if I flick over the list, I can see exactly where I'm up to on that list. So I'll have a look and I'll find an appropriate aortic root frame to measure, and I'll say, oh, I'll probably prefer that one. I'll get to the right frame, and then I will drag my cursor into the correct positions and then hit next step. And next on my list is the ascending aortic diameter, and so I'll have a look and I'll say I'll prefer to use this one, and I'll try and, yep, around this frame would be appropriate, so I'll measure my aortic dimension there. So I'll go next step again, and then next is telling me that I'm going to go to the peak pulmonary velocity, and so I will go through my page and I'll say that's my pulsed wave and that's my continuous wave, and I'm looking for my continuous wave, and so I'll click onto there and I'll go next step again. How I've got it set up is my next measurement will be my left atrial volume, and I will have a look at the different images I've got and find one that I'm happiest with in terms of measuring from. I think that one looks just fine. When I'm doing volumes, I can do two methods. I can click between points if I so want to, and I can take it like that. I can then edit and move my points as required. From here I'll go next step, and if I want to, rather than clicking, I can just hold down my left hand button and drag this around, and I can go backwards if I'm not happy with where I am, and then I can take it up and then release it, and on releasing it will then lock in. And again, I'll move my central axis to a better position, and then from there I would go next. And the next step it tells me is my mitral inflow, and so I'll click onto here and I'll go my E velocity and now my deceleration time from there. So again, I'll click here and then I'll drag my deceleration time across like that, and then the next one will be my A wave velocity. And then next step again. And from there, I'm looking at an E prime velocity and septal, and then also for the lateral wall. And from that, I have it set so that I actually go to the S prime. And then from there, I actually have the right ventricular RV base. And so if I just get to about there and measure across to there. And following that, I have my mitral, my tricuspid annular excursion. And so from here, I would then measure across. This one, my point doesn't come across, but if I start on the baseline and then follow my mouse up to the peak there, that will be the correct positioning. And then I click when I'm happy and in position. And so from here, it's now asking for a tricuspid regurgitation peak velocity, and so I can look through the different ones, and if I can even click on and think, oh, is that my peak? And I think, no, I don't like that one. I think that looks a bit better. Maybe I'll use that one there. Then I think, oh, I actually had another one earlier that might have even been better. And it's only when I get to the point of actually selecting next will it lock in that measurement that I have done. And so I'll come down again, probably to that one. I think it's probably better. And so at this point, I can go next and it will lock that in. If I now go to my peak aortic velocity, I can select that. And then my next one will be looking at the ventricular ejection fraction. And so again, I'll find my appropriate frame. And with this, I often might play it first just so I can pick my points I'm going to use. When I'm happy where I'm going to use, I'll then freeze it, use my scroll wheel to get into place, and then it's either use my click or my drag to get it into place. And then, let's say I can move as required. and then come through to get to my appropriate frame again, and then in this case I'll drag, go like that, but I might come back and then adjust and alter various points if I so want. And if I want to, I can remeasure. I can use the resample, which just will redistribute the dots around there. So I go next, and to lock in that ejection fraction, I need to actually go next step again to take me to the 2-chamber. And so now I'll come to a 2-chamber frame. Again, I will just play it, let it run through. And then I think, okay, I can see a point over here that I'll use. And so I'll drag that to there. And then again, using my scroll wheel, we'll come down like that. And then we'll bring that down to there. And again, when I go next, it'll give me its calculated ejection fraction. And as I can still manipulate and do what I need to as well before locking it in. Then I go to next step again. And at this point, it'll tell me I'm looking at the left atrial volume. I can look and I can scroll through and think, which one do I prefer? And I'll say that one will be just fine. And so I can, again, if I've got to that point and thought, oh, it's rubbish, I can just use the resample, button, and then I will come back and drag that up to there. And then at this point, I will go next step again, and I have a last measurement of the IVC diameter. And so I can have a look and find where that actually is best measured. And I would say here would be the widest, proximal to the hepatic vein, and then I can come and put that here, and being the last measurement, it will give me a save option. So I go save. Then what I was saying before is at this point I need to just calculate my ejection fraction to lock it in. And so if I go up here and I go LV EDV biplane, it'll just give me a biplane volume. And then if I go to repeat the same process for the LV end systolic volume, and then at this point I can then get the left ventricular biplane volume. I'll save that. And so at this point all my measurements are now locked in, as we can see down the side here. And of course, if at any point I want to go back and edit, I can easily do that too, or I can repeat a measurement. And if I want to edit, I just click this, and then I will go to the edit icon, and I can move as required and resave that. And if I want to do another ejection fraction on the picture, I can also do that as well. Okay, thank you.